book. Should be one in front of you or somewhere near in front of you. Number 109, Great is Thy Faithfulness. And then Brother Steve is going to do another chorus with us. So 109, and you can remain seated. You just came in and sat down, so I won't make you stand up. 109, let's sing together. Great is Thy Faithfulness. Great is Thy faithfulness. I was stretching my baritone voice a little bit. It's a little high. Brother Steve?
Speaking about fear and doubt. Remember that evening service? So if you went to the doctor, spiritual doctor, and you said, I have a bad case of fear and doubt, what would you prescribe for me? I'm going to give you 2 bottles of pills. Okay? They're 2 choruses. Okay? They kind of link together. I think we might have sung one of these already. Trust. It's entitled, Why Worry When You Can Pray? That's the first little bottle. Okay? You take this whenever you need it. Okay? You can't overdose on them. You take that one. So let's sing that one first, and then I'll give you another one. Okay? Let's see. I'll get you started on hopefully right note. Getting old ain't for sissies, you know. Here we go. Why worry when you can pray? Trust Jesus, He'll be your stay. Don't be a doubting Thomas. Rest fully on His promise. Why worry, 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 worry when you can pray? Try that again. You were a little rusty on that. Let's try that one more time. Why worry when Okay, here's bottle number 2. I don't think we've sung this one before. It's a song entitled, Cheer Up Ye Saints of God. You've heard this song? Okay, so let me read you the words and then I'll teach you this little chorus. Cheer up, this is like a good old Scottish song, okay? Cheer up, ye saints of God, there's nothing to worry about. Nothing to make you feel afraid, nothing to make you doubt. Remember, Jesus never fails, so why not trust him and shout? You'll be sorry you worried at all tomorrow morning. Okay? Here's how it goes. Cheer up, ye saints of God, there's nothing to worry about. Nothing to make you feel afraid, nothing to make you doubt. Remember, Jesus never fails, so why not trust him and shout? You'll be sorry you worried at all tomorrow morning. Doesn't that sound like a good old Scottish song? Let's try it. Here we go. Cheer up, ye saints of God, there's nothing to worry about. Nothing to make you feel afraid, nothing to make you doubt. Remember, Jesus never fails, so why not trust him and shout? You'll be sorry you worried at all tomorrow morning. You gotta do it one more time. You're almost there. Here we go. Cheer up, ye saints of God, there's nothing to worry about. Nothing to make you feel afraid, nothing to make you doubt. Remember, Jesus never fails, so why not trust him and shout? You'll be sorry you worried at all tomorrow morning. 2 pill bottles.
Right. We'll have to get the words to that one on the screen next time. So, all right, I need 2 handsome men that would pass these out. I'm going to pick these 2 guys right here. They have beautiful heads, those guys. Thanks for volunteering, Brother Ken. And we can turn to Hebrews 12 while you're waiting for your hand up. Hebrews 12. All right, Hebrews 12. And we'll look at verses 1 to 3. Hopefully we have enough of those. I don't have a PowerPoint, so I have to listen carefully for the points so you can fill in your blanks. And you'll have to write small. I apologize. I don't think those blanks are going to be sufficiently long for some of the words. So, all right, Hebrews 12, look at verse 1. Therefore we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. For consider him who endured such hostility from sinners against himself, lest you become weary and discouraged in your souls. How many of you enjoy the Olympics? When the Olympics come around, how many of you enjoy? Right, most people do. Do you remember when you had winter and summer in the same year? And then maybe it was wise that they split those and offset those. So when back in the day, when the Olympics came and you were really into the Olympics, you'd be tied to your television a lot that particular year. But I do enjoy the Olympics. But I'll say this, I don't enjoy the Olympics as much as I used to enjoy the Olympics. Because the Olympics of today is not quite what it used to be when I was a teenager and really enjoyed watching the Olympics. Do you know what I mean? What I mean is this. How many of you remember when the athletes were amateurs. Okay, remember that? I mean, except for maybe a few cheaters, a few countries. Can we say this? Are we? There's a few countries that sort of, there's always that kind of stuff. Now it's cheating with drugs that will enhance the athlete. But there were some nations that really fudged a little bit on the amateur versus professional. But for now, I mean, I'm not really a basketball fan, but I would not watch the basketball Olympics today because it's NBA players. They just pick all-stars, right? So if you like that, that's fine. Don't get upset at me that, you know, if you like watching that, they put together a dream team, right, for the Olympics. And then usually, doesn't America usually wipe up on, anyway. Purely Americans used to play, but today it's a lot of professionals. Now, this is probably a silly question to ask. How many of you remember the 1980 U.S. hockey team? Okay, I was glued to that, and there was a lot of reasons to be interested in that. That team accomplished a feat, and what has it been called? The Miracle on Ice, right? Not too long after we were in Vermont, we were going out, and we like to visit places, and we crossed the lake on the ferry, and we went to Lake Placid. And I remember sitting in the ice arena where they played, and obviously there's still a lot of memory of that all around the stadium. Wow, this is where the Miracle on Ice took place. Well, that team was amateurs. Our team was made up of mostly collegiate players, but other amateurs. The coach was Herb Brooks, and that team defeated the Soviet Union in a preliminary round, score of 4-3. So the amazing win was not for a gold medal. It was in a preliminary round. Now, the Soviets were considered the best international hockey team in the world, and the Americans were not even expected to compete for a medal. Weren't even really expected to get into the medal round. They had been seeded 7th in the final round of 12 teams. So that's where we were, 7th in a round of 12. But they did qualify for the Lake Placid Olympics. Obviously, the Soviet team was favored to win, though classed as amateur. The Soviet players essentially played professionally. They were all active duty in the Red Army. They were in a well-developed league. They were using excellent training facilities. They were led by legendary players in the world of ice hockey. And in fact, a year earlier, the Soviet Union national team had routed NHL All-Stars 6-0. That's incredible. That was called the Challenge Cup. So the Soviet and American teams, it would be putting it mildly to say that they were rival teams, right? Because you got to figure out what else was going on politically in the world at that time. This was what year? 1980. Okay. In addition to that, President Carter was contemplating a boycott of the upcoming Summer Olympics, 1980. That was going to be held because that was going to be held where? Moscow, right. And so Carter was considering that in protest of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. Before the Olympics, the two teams met for an exhibition match at Madison Square Garden in order to practice for the upcoming competition, and the Soviet Union won 10-3. And that was probably a mercy. So at the Olympics, the U.S. and USSR prepared for the medal round in different ways. The Soviet coach rested his players, but had them study plays, but didn't do a lot of skating and practicing in that sense, while the U.S. coach, Herb Brooks, continued a tough, confrontational style of coaching. Probably the kind of coaching that in this world would be considered very tough. Hard practices. He was known to berate his athletes. Those athletes could take it back in that day. There's some bias here, right? You can hear it in me. As a teacher, we deal with, I won't say it, let me go on. The day before the match, columnist Dave Anderson wrote in the New York Times, quote, "Unless the ice melts, or unless the United States team or another team performs a miracle, the Russians are expected to easily win the Olympic gold medal for the 6th time in the last 7 tournaments." Okay, so this is a giant, right? So why did America win? We won. Why do you think we won? Those of you that know the time period, the era, the atmosphere, what do you think contributed? This would be our assumptions, right? Jim, what do you think?
They had a lot of heart.
They had a lot of heart. They did have a lot of heart.
The crowd, when they did something right, the crowd erupted. So they had this whole atmosphere around them that really pushed them to
Right.
go beyond what their abilities really were.
Right, and you could say we were the home team, right? Lake Placid. Charlie?
Excuse me, they were inspired by something.
Yeah, what were they inspired by? You're right. Patriotism. Why? What was happening in 1980? I mean, we're really near the end of the Cold War. Then came President Reagan. Wow, what a difference maker. Not to get into politics, but there was a difference between the Jimmy Carter approach and the Ronald Reagan approach. So I think those are all factors. I would say their discipline as a team that came from their coach. They were amateurs, and some of those guys were hopeful to become a part of what in the future? What do you think they wanted to be part of? The NHL. So this was, if I do a good job here in the Olympics, maybe I'll be able to play in the NHL. So there's a drive, there's a desire to win. These guys want to become professional players, but perhaps the cause was greater because of the political ramifications at stake. Nonetheless, it was just exciting to watch. Isn't it interesting to see what motivates people and to see what people will really work hard at, what they'll be devoted to, what they have a determination for? And you see it a lot in the sports world, but you see it in other areas as well. I have a great respect, as I'm sure you do too, for those whose lives are in the passionate pursuit of a goal. And I'm amazed to see the dedication and devotion that people will put into accomplishing a life goal. The other thing about the Olympics back then, they seemed to tell more stories about the athletes and where they came from. And so there were a lot of human interest stories with that. I think that still goes on to a degree today, but I just remember a lot of that. Tonight, I want us to consider the Christian life and the Christian's goal. Is there a greater goal than living a life that meets God's approval and receives God's reward? Is there a greater life than that? If you think there is, you're probably just too tied to this temporary world, right? I mean, what greater goal is there than living for Christ's approval, receiving reward? And how many are really involved in the passionate pursuit of that goal? So consider this with me tonight as we look at going, I call it going for the gold. and the discipline and endurance involved in the Christian life. And that's really going to come out. Were those athletes disciplined? Yes. Did they endure? Yes. That's what it takes in the Christian life. So we've already read Hebrews 12, 1 through 3. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever thought of sort of giving up in some area of the Christian life? You don't have to raise your hand to that, but if I asked for raisings of hand, mine would be up. Some of you have heard me tell this. In Christian education, for many, many years, every once in a while there'd be a school year where I'd get to the end of the school year and I'd say, I think I might be able to do something else. I don't know what that is, but I would get discouraged. The school year would be long. As a school administrator in Detroit, the discipline situations were really difficult. Students that I had to discipline, some had to expel. Some of those years would get really grueling, and I'd come to the end and I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. And then God transplanted us from Detroit to Maine. And right, Dana, was Maine was very stress-free. There's a lot of reasons for that. The kids, number one, the kids were not as much influenced by, like it is being a teenager in Detroit. There was a difference. Two, the Christian school there, in order to enroll, your parents had to be members of the church. So it was only members that could go to that school. So I would say that everyone was pretty much on the same, not pretty much, everyone was on the same page. So that was a different thing, but I can remember going to junior, senior banquets in Michigan, 19 years there, and I'd be, at the end of the school year, a lot of stress, especially finishing up the school year, and I'd be thinking, I'm just tired. I'm just worn out. I'm discouraged. And I'm not a quitter, but I really felt like quitting sometimes. But what we would do at that banquet, junior senior banquet, is what we've been doing here for the last 6 years, is that banquet was an awards banquet for the seniors, but it was also a time for the seniors to give testimony. We had the seniors write testimonies for graduation. They all wrote them, and then we would select some that would be given in the graduation ceremony. Of course, the valedictorian always gave a speech. The salutatorian always gave a speech. But we would have all the students write a testimony. We would give them help on how to write a testimony that would be delivered as a speech. And we would then pick some to speak in the graduation ceremony. But then we would tell the seniors, hey, we want you to give a testimony at the banquet. And one of the things we would tell them is, at the banquet, that doesn't have to be as planned out. So we would say, hey, listen, when you give your testimony, just tell everybody what the Lord has done in your life over the last number of years in a Christian school. And then we said, use that time too to thank your parents. You really need to be grateful for the investment that your parents put into your life. And so these kids would get up and they would give testimony and they would tell what the Lord had done in their lives. And you could sit there and you could acknowledge that, yeah, that student has grown spiritually in the Christian school. And they're actually vocalizing what God has done in their life. And then there's that appreciation that was toward parents, and sometimes it was toward teachers. And we would try to tell them, when you give your testimony and you appreciate the teachers, do it generally, because we didn't want, one student gets up there, thanks Mr. Amick, who was the science teacher of science teachers, right, Dana? Mr. Amick. Every Christian college wanted to hire Mr. Amick, but he stayed at our school. there were all kinds of students, especially girls, that went into nursing. And it was a direct influence of Mr. Amick. He had this anatomy and physiology class. Excellent teacher, had a huge influence and impact on kids. So someone get up, thank Mr. Amick, and if we didn't say, hey, think about this, every student would say, Mr. Amick influenced my life, he's a wonderful man, praise God for him. And then the rest of the teachers are like, did I accomplish anything? But they would do it generally, and then, they would do that specifically with some teachers. And there were at least a couple junior, senior banquets where I'd get to the end of that night and I would say, thank you, Lord, for letting me listen to those testimonies. You are working in the lives of young people. I get to be a part of it, and I want to do this. But have you ever gotten discouraged in an area of your Christian walk? You've grown weary in some aspect of your Christian faith. I think this passage will be a real encouragement to you to keep on keeping on. So let's take a look at it. On a number of occasions, the author of Hebrews encourages us to endure in the faith. You have to realize that the author is writing to Jewish converts who were familiar with the Old Testament and who were being tempted to revert to Judaism or to Judaize the gospel, if you will. And the theme of the epistle is the absolute supremacy and sufficiency of Jesus Christ. You say that again, that's the theme. I think you know that. The theme of the epistle in Hebrews is the absolute supremacy and sufficiency of Jesus Christ. I am thinking about when we finally get through the Gospel of Mark to go into Hebrews. I think that'd be a great transition. When I was a teenager, after rebellion, where I genuinely came to Christ in saving faith, which was evidenced by change occurring in my life, I studied the book of Hebrews. I have a notebook at somewhere in the house, in the basement somewhere, where I took a spiral-bound notebook and I went by verse by verse through Hebrews and used a couple commentaries to help with that, a study Bible. And I still remember that to this day, the absolute supremacy and sufficiency of Jesus Christ. These Jews were challenged to resist temptations to give up the struggle and persevere in the spiritual contest in which they had committed themselves. And so there is tremendous application for all of us in Hebrews, especially in this chapter with this topic. How many of you have made spiritual decisions and commitments and then struggled to live them out? Again, you don't need to raise your hand, but if I were in the crowd and someone said that, my hand would go up. How many of you have faced temptations that have weakened your spiritual walk? And I think if we're going to be honest, everyone would raise their hand to that question. So let's look at the plea and encouragement to persevere in the life of faith. And we'll look at 6 things here. You have an outline with 6 major points about a spiritual contest, if you will. We do believe that Paul is the author. We can't be super dogmatic about it, but we do believe Paul is the author. And Paul does like to use athletic illustrations, does he not? Yes. In a number of his epistles. So look at verse 1. Again, therefore, we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. So in verse 1, I want you to see the warrant or authorization to endure. The warrant or the authorization to endure. And that is Let us run with patience. What does the word patience there mean? So let's put on our thesaurus hats. Okay. What does the word patience there mean? Just shout it out. Endurance. Long suffering. Yes. Good. That's a really good word. We don't use it today, but I get it. To suffer long. That's patience. All right? Would perseverance work? Does that work? So the word patience means endurance or perseverance. Your words work too. You could write those words that were offered up by you, but endurance or perseverance on your outline. The Christian life is being compared to a race here. What kind of race do you think this is? And it's an endurance race. What kind of races do we? So let's talk about Summer Olympics. Anyone in here that was good at the sprint? Not me. Were you? Yeah, that girl right there. Yes. We got a young athlete here. Were you pretty good at that? Right? I was never a sprinter. I'm not an endurance runner either. My sport in high school, after I failed at some, was wrestling. And someone compared wrestling to a marathon. You got 3 periods, 2 minutes each. A marathon with a sprint every 3 miles. If you've never wrestled as a sport, maybe that doesn't make sense to you. But those of you that have wrestled as a sport, that makes sense to you, right? But what kind of race is this? It's an endurance race, right? And it is a spiritual, right? It's a spiritual race. So this is an endurance. So let's compare it to a marathon. Can we do that? Okay. How long is a marathon? It's 26.2, isn't it? Okay. 26.2 miles. I don't know if I've ever walked that far. Is there anyone in the room that's you've run a marathon before? Anyone in the room? Wow, Miss Carrie. Did you guys do it together? No. Okay. Mr. Carrie and Miss Carrie. Anyone else? Okay. Well, they could give us testimony then. They could give us personal testimony. 26.2 miles. Who is the man that was from our church that runs these? Yeah, you guys know. Ron Newhart. I got to meet Ron Newhart on a couple of occasions. One was the first year I was here. We took juniors and seniors to the Wilds in Brevard, North Carolina. And we stayed at their house overnight on the way there. Wow, they are really neat people. And of course, sisters with Mrs. Reno, right? And so Ron took me down into the basement, and he showed me his medals. And my mouth was hanging open. Those of you that don't know Ron Newhart, he is on how many marathons now? He's in the 30s or 40s?
30s.
I wanted to say 36. The man has run 35 to close to 40. Oh, yeah, that's the number of states. Thank you for reminding me. Yeah, so he's probably run more than that. But his goal is to run a marathon in all 50 states, and he's at number 30-something. Okay, amazing. And he does pretty well. How old is he? 70. He's almost 70.
He's younger than me. He's about 66 or 7.
Okay, and in his age category, he does well. Okay, well, I can get caught up in illustrations. Lots of illustrations tonight. This is going to be a 2-parter. So, for the rest of the story, you must come back Sunday night next week. Okay, but here's the point. Ron Newhart that's amazing to do that many. I've never run one. I imagine it is grueling. I've had friends that have run them and have told me about it, and they spent not only months, but in some cases over a year preparing for their first marathon. It's studying it, learning how to do it. There's a whole science to it too, right? And then I had one guy who really worked hard to prepare, and he said after his first marathon, it was months before he felt like he had recovered from running that race. Now, I really think he did it the right way. Imagine if you don't do it the right way. So, what a feat. Do you think marathon runners, we could ask Bob or Natalie, do you think marathon runners at some point in the race say, I don't know if I can keep doing this? And their body is telling their brain, I don't want to do this anymore. Did that ever come up, Bob? No, not for Bob.
Every now and then.
Right.
About every mile.
Natalie, were there times when you just had to tell your body, we're going to keep going, we're going to keep doing this, because your body was saying, I'm done? Okay. Well, again, I could get too carried away with the illustration, but it's a good illustration, isn't it? We are spiritually in a race. And it's not a sprint. Sprint and whoo, we're done. It's over. It's a marathon. And we are being encouraged to run with patience. So the application is don't quit. Okay? When temptations come, don't quit. When trials come, don't quit. When you get weary and tired, don't quit. If you have fallen in some aspect of the Christian life, get up, don't quit. When you see others quitting around you, don't quit. When you're tempted with troubling sin, don't quit. Can you fill in any more? Charlie?
Did a little bit of running in high school, and our coach said, I'm going to take quit and quitting out of your vocabulary.
Yeah.
It will not be part of your vocabulary or life.
Yeah.
You'll never, ever quit. And I remember that very vividly.
Yes. Listen to Paul's words in Acts 20. I consider my life worth nothing to me if only I may finish the race and complete the task the Lord Jesus has given me. So God's will for your life is this race, this spiritual race. And so we need to, next point there on your outline, we need to run to win. Run to win. I don't think Ron Newhart runs to not win. That would be my favorite word. That would be silly. And he gets to the end and he likes getting that medal that says you did it. So God's will for our life is to run this race that God has for us. And we need to run to win. Paul also says in 1 Corinthians 9 that in a race all the runners run, but only one receives a prize. Except for in today's world. Right? He then communicates that there is strict training involved, but this race has lasting or eternal benefits. And so what's the application? Are you seeking to be victorious as a Christian? And if you say yes, what is the proof of it? Because you hear me refer to the Sunday school answers, right? Many of us, not all of us, many of us grew up in Sunday schools as children, and so we got taught the lessons, and we know what to say. We know the answers. So if we hear the questions, boom, out of our mouth comes the answer. But it'd be better for us to stop and think. Am I attempting to be victorious as a Christian? If I say yes, what is the proof? And the question would be this: am I training? What is the training for the Christian life? What are some disciplines that need to be part of your life as a Christian? Jim's holding up his Bible. Reading the Bible and studying the Bible. What other spiritual disciplines are there that you should be engaged in as a Christian? Prayer. Going to church. What else? Okay. And serving. We'll just generalize it that way. Living a life that is glorifying to the Lord. If you will have much trouble if you don't train. And then lastly, and we'll talk about this next time, so you can hold on to your outline. That's a reoccurring theme here with me. Hold on to your outline. You should have me as a teacher in school. But the last thing here is that Jesus is our example. Verses 2 and 3. Look at verses 2 and 3, and then I'll wrap this up. Verse 2. So you look to Jesus, who is the author and finisher of our faith. So he went before us. You know this. In chapter 11, what does the author talk to us about? What do we have in chapter 11? The heroes of the faith, which I believe, by the way, are the great cloud of witnesses. So just try to imagine this arena, and you're competing, and you look up in the stands, and in the stands are these heroes that went before you. But better yet, what is the theme of Hebrews? The supremacy of Jesus. Better yet, you look to Jesus. Now, the Old Testament saints there's a lot of things. This Pastor Randy had been doing this on Wednesday nights, taking us through Hebrews 11. We got through the first 3 of those heroes there. But they provide for us great encouragement. But here's the thing. Sometimes we don't think of those Old Testament saints as being normal people. Okay? But were they normal people? Yes. But somehow we categorize them as super Christians. Well, we can't compare to them. Well, look, God did use them in incredible and amazing ways. And God can use you in the ways that He has planned for you. And that is a good thing. You may not lead a nation through the wilderness, but God has a realm for you to have influence, and Christian influence. And so, but look to Jesus, all right, just very quickly. Fix your eyes on Him. Does a runner sometimes fix their eyes on something to help concentrate to finish the race? I think so. Okay. What does a runner do when he sees the finish line? Sometimes, yeah, if you can, right? Fix your eyes on Him like a runner would concentrate on a finish line. Notice there, He is our leader. Look to Him. I don't mean to be silly, but let Him be the pace setter. Okay? He is the author of our faith. He is the finisher of our faith. Did He complete His course? What was His course? Death on a cross. Did He complete the course? And that's what it says. He endured the cross and the shame. And what a survivor. So I hope that's enough to get you encouraged. And then next Sunday night, we'll continue with that. All right? We need to take some time for testimonies. And then we'll take some prayer requests here.